The taser's electric crackle drops 68-year-old Master Sergeant Harold Dutch Patterson to his knees beside his wife's fresh grave. His German Shepherd Rex lunges forward, teeth bared, as Officer Kyle Jennings screams, "Get that dog under control or I'll shoot it!" Dutch's trembling hand reaches out, not toward the officer, but toward Catherine's headstone, just inches away. "Please," he gasps through the voltage still coursing through his body. "I just want to say goodbye to my wife." 5 minutes later, a Navy SEAL in combat uniform appears at the cemetery gates, a military K-9 at his side. If stories honoring our veterans move you, subscribe now and follow this to the end. Comment your city below so I can see how far this message travels. Catherine Patterson died on a Tuesday morning with autumn leaves falling past the hospital window and her husband's hand wrapped around hers. Dutch had been holding that hand for 12 hours straight. The nurses offered him coffee blankets, a chair that reclined. He refused everything except the privilege of staying exactly where he was. 45 years of marriage. 3 wars. 2 children. One love that never wavered. When the heart monitor flatlined, Dutch didn't cry. He simply kissed her forehead and whispered, "I'll see you soon, sweetheart. Save me a seat." That was 5 days ago. Now Dutch knelt at her grave, his arthritic knees aching against the cold October ground, his old suit hanging loose on a frame that had shrunk with grief. "I don't know how to do this without you, Kath," he said softly. 45 years, and I still don't know how to make coffee the way you like it. Liked it. Rex sat beside him, the German Shepherd's warm body pressed against Dutch's leg. The dog hadn't left his side since Catherine's passing, as if understanding that his purpose had shifted from companion to protector. "You remember when we got Rex?" Dutch continued talking to the headstone as naturally as he'd talked to Catherine across their kitchen table. "You said you needed company while I was deployed. I said, Kath, I'm too old for deployments. And you said, Dutch Patterson, you'll never be too old for duty. That's what worries me." He chuckled, but the sound caught in his throat. "You were right. You were always right." The funeral had ended hours ago. Their children, grown with families of their own, had offered to stay. Dutch had sent them home. "I need some time with your mother," he'd told them. "Just the 2 of us. One more time." They understood, or they tried to. No one really understood, Dutch thought. Not unless they'd spent 45 years building a life with someone. Not unless they'd watched that someone fight for every breath at the end. Not unless they'd held a hand that had held them through every storm and felt it go still. "The house is too quiet," Dutch said. "Dutch, I keep expecting to hear you humming in the kitchen. That song you always hummed, what was it? Something from the radio when we were courting." Rex's ears suddenly flattened. A low growl rumbled in the dog's chest. Dutch's military instincts, dormant for decades but never truly gone, immediately registered the shift. "Easy, boy." Footsteps approached. Authoritative, deliberate. "Sir, the cemetery closed an hour ago." Dutch turned slowly. A young officer stood behind him, hand resting on his duty belt. 24, maybe 25. The kind of crisp uniform and eager posture that screamed fresh out of academy. "I'm just visiting my wife," Dutch said. "We buried her this morning." "I understand, sir, but cemetery hours are posted. You need to leave." "I just need a few more minutes." "Sir, I've received a complaint about a vagrant with an aggressive dog. I'm going to need you to gather your things and exit the premises." Dutch felt something cold settle in his chest. Vagrant. He looked down at his suit. The same navy blue suit he'd worn to receive his Silver Star. It was old, yes. Worn at the elbows. But it was clean. It was dignified. "Officer, my name is Harold Patterson. Master Sergeant, United States Army, retired. This is my wife's grave. That's my dog. And I am not a vagrant." The officer's expression didn't change. "Sir, I didn't ask for your life story. I asked you to leave." Rex's growl intensified. "Shut that dog up," the officer snapped, "or I'll consider it a threat." Dutch placed his hand on Rex's head. Easy, boy. It's okay. But it wasn't okay. Something about this young man's tone, his posture, his complete lack of human recognition, told Dutch that this wasn't going to end with a polite request. Officer, what's your name? Jennings, Kyle Jennings. Officer Jennings, I served this country for 30 years. I have a Silver Star and 2 Bronze Stars. I buried my wife of 45 years this morning. All I'm asking for is a few more minutes to say goodbye. Jennings's jaw tightened. And I'm telling you that cemetery hours are posted and you're trespassing. Now stand up and come with me, or I'll have to assume you're refusing a lawful order. You're really going to do this today here? Sir, I don't make the rules, I enforce them. Dutch looked back at Catherine's headstone. What would you tell me to do, Kath? He could almost hear her voice. Pick your battles, Dutch. This one isn't worth it. But something in him couldn't move. Couldn't walk away from her grave with a police officer treating him like a criminal. I'm not trespassing. I have permission from the funeral director to stay as long as I need. The funeral director isn't here. I am, and I'm telling you to leave. Dutch's knees ached as he shifted position. His back screamed from kneeling on cold ground. His heart hammered with a mixture of grief and rising anger. Son, I've been arrested by enemies of this country. I've been held prisoner for 3 days by people who wanted me dead. I survived all of that to come home to Catherine, to build a life with her, to raise our children, and to be here at the end when she needed me. He stood slowly, his joints protesting every inch. I am not leaving my wife's grave because a 20-something with a badge told me that visiting hours are over. Jennings' hand moved to his radio. Dispatch, this is Unit 7. I've got an uncooperative individual at Maple Grove Cemetery, requesting backup. Backup? Dutch stared at him. For an old man at a funeral? Sir, you're being non-compliant. That's a safety concern. I'm a safety concern. I'm 68 years old with arthritis in both knees, and a dog who's only growling because you're threatening his owner. Control your dog, or I'll neutralize the threat. Neutralize? He's not a threat. He's a 12-year-old German Shepherd who loved my wife. 2 more patrol cars pulled up within minutes. Dutch watched them arrive with a growing sense of disbelief. 3 cars. For him. For a grieving widower at his wife's grave. Officer Sandra Hayes emerged from the second car. Mid-30s, experienced eyes. She took in the scene quickly, and Dutch saw something flicker across her face. Doubt. Jennings, what's the situation? Vagrant refusing to leave after hours. Aggressive animal. Hayes looked at Dutch, at his suit, at the fresh grave behind him, at the German Shepherd sitting obediently at his side. Sir, were you at the funeral here today? Yes, ma'am. My wife, Catherine. We were married 45 years. Hayes's expression softened. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. She turned to Jennings. Kyle, maybe we should... I've already given him multiple chances to comply. Jennings interrupted. He's refusing lawful orders. The dog is a threat. That dog isn't doing anything. It growled at me. It's a dog. Dogs growl when they sense their owners are upset. The third officer, Mike Trent, walked over. Young like Jennings, the same academy energy. What do we got? Trespasser won't leave, Jennings said. Threatening behavior. I haven't threatened anyone, Dutch said quietly. Your dog? My dog is sitting. Look at him. He's sitting. Rex was in fact sitting perfectly still, though his eyes tracked every officer with protective alertness. Hayes stepped closer to Dutch. Sir, I don't want this to escalate. How about you come with us? We'll straighten this out at the station, and you can come back tomorrow during visiting hours. Come back tomorrow. Dutch's voice cracked. Officer, I've been saying goodbye to Catherine since the funeral ended this morning. That's 8 hours. 8 hours isn't enough. 45 years isn't enough. Nothing will ever be enough. His hand trembled as he pointed at the headstone. That woman right there was my entire world. She raised our children while I was overseas. She held our family together through 3 wars. She nursed me through a bullet wound, 2 surgeries, and the kind of nightmares that make you afraid to sleep. Tears spilled down his weathered cheeks. And when she got sick, when the cancer came back for the 3rd time, she never once complained. Not once. She just kept smiling and telling me it would be okay, that I'd be okay. His voice dropped to a whisper. She lied. She lied because she loved me. And I knew she was lying, and I loved her for it. Hayes's eyes glistened. Even Trent looked uncomfortable, but Jennings remained unmoved. Sir, I'm going to give you one more chance. Stand up, control your animal, and come with us peacefully, or I will use force. Kyle, Hayes said sharply, stand down. I'm primary on this call. And I'm telling you, this isn't the call to make an example. Use your judgment. My judgment says he's non-compliant. My judgment says that dog is a threat. My judgment says I'm doing my job. Dutch looked at Jennings with something close to pity. Son, I've commanded men in combat, real combat. I've sent boys not much older than you into firefights where not everyone came home. And the one thing I learned, the one thing that mattered more than tactics or training, was knowing when to hold the line and when to stand down. He shook his head slowly. You're about to make a mistake that'll follow you the rest of your life. I'm asking you not as someone you have authority over, but as one human being to another. Let me say goodbye to my wife. Jennings' hand moved to his taser. Sir, I'm placing you under arrest for trespassing, refusing to comply with lawful orders, and threatening a police officer with a dangerous animal. Kyle, no. Hayes stepped forward, but Jennings had already pulled his weapon. Put your hands behind your back, now. Dutch stood perfectly still. His mind flashed to another moment decades ago when he'd faced armed men who wanted him dead. He'd survived that. He'd survived everything. He wouldn't survive losing Catherine, and he wouldn't walk away from her grave in handcuffs. I'm not resisting, Dutch said quietly. I'm just not leaving. Then you're under arrest. Jennings grabbed Dutch's arm to spin him around. Rex barked sharply once, positioning himself between his owner and the threat. The dog, Jennings shouted. It's attacking. He's not attacking, Dutch tried to say. He's just... The taser fired. 50,000 volts slammed into Dutch's chest. His body seized muscles contracting involuntarily. He fell hard, his knees hitting the cold ground just feet from Catherine's headstone. The electricity coursed through him, turning his limbs into rigid, useless appendages. His hand, reaching out in some desperate instinct, brushed against the cold marble of her grave. Rex howled. The sound tore through the cemetery like a wound, the cry of a loyal animal watching his person suffer. Someone shut that dog up, Jennings yelled. Nobody touch the dog, Hayes commanded. Kyle, release the taser, now! The current stopped. Dutch collapsed, fully gasping, his cheek pressed against the ground. His vision swam. His heart hammered erratically. He'd survived firefights, survived capture, survived watching friends die. This was worse, because Catherine was here, right here, and he was lying on the ground beside her grave, helpless, humiliated, treated like a criminal for the simple act of grief. Rex tried to reach him, but Trent had grabbed the dog's collar. Easy, boy, Dutch wheezed. Easy. His eyes found the headstone. Catherine's name carved in stone. I'm sorry, sweetheart, he whispered. I'm so sorry. Not far away, in a different section of the same cemetery, Marcus Cole knelt before another grave. Elena Marie Cole, beloved wife, my anchor in every storm. 6 months since cancer took her. 6 months of learning to live in a world that felt fundamentally wrong without her in it. Shadow sat beside him, the German shepherd's warm presence, a comfort that Marcus had come to depend on. The dog had been his partner through 3 tours in Afghanistan before an injury forced Shadow's retirement. Now they were both learning how to be something other than warriors. The house is still too quiet, Marcus said to the headstone. I keep expecting to hear you singing in the kitchen. You always sang so off-key, Elena. It was terrible. I miss it so much I could scream. His phone buzzed. Grandma Evelyn. Marcus frowned. His grandmother rarely called. She preferred texts, claiming phone calls were too old-fashioned. Grandma. Everything okay? Marcus. Her voice was shaking. Marcus, you need to come to the east section, right now. What's wrong? They're hurting him. That young officer, he tasered him. Dutch Patterson, at Catherine's grave. They tasered him, Marcus. Marcus was already moving. I'm coming, Grandma. Stay where you are. He ended the call and looked at Shadow. Work time, boy. The German Shepherd rose immediately, posture shifting from companion to operator. Even at his age, even with his limp from that long-ago IED, Shadow knew when duty called. They moved through the cemetery with purpose. Marcus still wore his Navy working uniform, green and brown digital camouflage. He'd come straight from base, straight to Elena's grave, without stopping to change. He heard the commotion before he saw it. A dog howling, raised voices, the crackle of radio static. Marcus rounded a row of headstones and took in the scene with tactical precision. 3 patrol cars, 3 officers, an elderly man on the ground near a fresh grave, a German Shepherd being restrained by one of the officers, and his grandmother standing at the edge of the confrontation phone, raised recording everything. Marcus felt something cold and focused settle over him. The same feeling he'd had before every mission. The switch that flipped from civilian to SEAL, from person to professional. He didn't run, didn't shout. He walked. Shadow kept perfect pace at his heel. Officer Hayes saw them first. Her eyes widened slightly as she took in his uniform, his bearing, the military working dog at his side. Sir, this is a police matter. Please stay back. Marcus didn't stop walking. That man on the ground, he said calmly. What's his status? Sir. That man on the ground. Is he conscious? Something in his voice made Hayes pause. Yes, he's conscious. Good. I'm going to check on him. Sir, I can't let you interfere with... Marcus stopped, looked directly into her eyes. My name is Marcus Cole, Chief Petty Officer, United States Navy SEALs. That man is a Master Sergeant with 30 years of service, including combat in 3 wars. I'm not interfering with anything. I'm providing aid to a veteran in distress. He resumed walking. No one stopped him. Marcus knelt beside Dutch, running trained eyes over the older man's condition. Dutch. Hey, Dutch. Can you hear me? Dutch's eyes focused slowly. Marcus Cole. Elena's husband. That's right. I'm here. You're going to be okay. They tased me. At Catherine's grave, they tased me. I know. I'm sorry. Can you move your hands and feet? Dutch flexed his fingers weakly. I think so. Good. Any chest pain? Everything hurts. Marcus turned to the officers, his voice sharp with controlled authority. This man is 68 years old with probable cardiac stress from an electrical discharge. He needs medical evaluation, now. Jennings stepped forward. Sir, this man is under arrest for what? Marcus stood, placing himself between Dutch and the young officer, for visiting his wife's grave, for grieving too long, for trespassing, refusing lawful orders, and threatening an officer with a dangerous animal. Marcus looked at Rex now, sitting protectively near Dutch, and then at Shadow, sitting calmly at his own side. That animal is a 12-year-old German Shepherd, who spent the last year watching his owner die of cancer. He's not dangerous. He's heartbroken. He stepped closer to Jennings. You want to know about dangerous animals? I've worked with military canines in combat zones. Dogs trained to take down armed insurgents. Dogs who've saved my life more times than I can count. He gestured toward Shadow. That's a dangerous animal, and he's not doing anything except waiting for my command, because that's what trained dogs do. That's what dogs with good handlers do. Jennings' face reddened. Sir, I don't care about your military service. This is a civilian matter, and I'm in charge here. "You're in charge of nothing," Marcus said quietly. "You're a young cop who just tasered a decorated veteran at his wife's funeral because you couldn't handle a grieving old man asking for 5 more minutes. He was non-compliant. He was grieving." The word echoed across the cemetery. More people had gathered now. Mrs. Carter with her phone. Other visitors. A groundskeeper who looked deeply uncomfortable with what was unfolding. Marcus turned to Hayes. "Sergeant, I presume you're the ranking officer here." Yes, technically." "Then you understand the optics of this situation. 3 patrol cars responding to a 68-year-old widower at his wife's grave. A taser deployed. A military veteran on the ground. And now a Navy SEAL asking very pointed questions about use of force." Hayes swallowed. "This is going to make the news," Marcus continued. "It's already on video. Every person here has a phone, and I promise you the story they're going to tell isn't going to be about a dangerous vagrant. It's going to be about a police officer who couldn't tell the difference between grief and resistance." Jennings opened his mouth. "Kyle." Hayes's voice was sharp. "Not another word." She moved toward Dutch, who was now sitting up with Marcus's help. "Mr. Patterson, on behalf of this department, I apologize. This should never have happened." Dutch looked at her with tired eyes. "I just wanted to say goodbye to my wife." "I know, and you have every right to do that." She turned to Jennings and Trent. "Remove the restraints, now." "Sergeant." "That is an order, Officer Jennings." The handcuffs came off. Marcus helped Dutch to his feet. The older man swayed slightly, and Marcus steadied him with a firm hand on his shoulder. "Easy. Take your time." "Thank you, son. I mean it. We look out for each other. That's what brothers do." Rex pressed against Dutch's leg, whimpering softly. Shadow approached the other German shepherd calmly, and the 2 dogs seemed to communicate in that silent way animals do. Rex's tension visibly eased. "Your dog," Dutch said quietly. "Military?" "Yeah, 3 tours. We came up through the teams together." Catherine would have liked him. She always said dogs were better judges of character than people. Marcus smiled faintly. "She sounds like she was wise." "Wisest person I ever knew." Mrs. Carter rushed over, still clutching her phone. "Marcus, honey, I got everything. Every single moment. That young officer, the taser, everything." "Thank you, Grandma." That man should be ashamed of himself, treating Dutch like that, at Catherine's funeral. Dutch put his hand on her arm. "It's all right, Evelyn. It's over now." "It most certainly is not all right. I'm sending this video to everyone I know. My church group, the VFW, the news station." Hayes stepped forward. "Ma'am, I understand you're upset, but I'd ask you to let us handle this internally." "Handle it internally." Mrs. Carter drew herself up to her full 5 feet of righteous indignation. "You mean like you handled it just now by letting a child with a badge terrorize a grieving old man?" "Grandma," Marcus said gently, "let's focus on Dutch right now." But the crowd was growing. Other veterans had arrived, drawn by texts and calls. Men in VFW caps, women who'd served. People who'd heard that something was happening at Maple Grove and needed to see for themselves. They formed a loose perimeter around Dutch, not threatening the officers, but making their presence felt. One of them, a weathered man in his 70s, stepped forward. "Master Sergeant Patterson, I'm Bill Turner. I served under your command in Desert Storm." Dutch's eyes widened. "Turner? My God. Private Turner. Staff sergeant by the time I retired. But yeah, you probably don't remember, but you saved my life once. Kuwait City, when our convoy got hit." "I remember. I remember every one of you." Turner turned to face the officers. "This man carried me 200 yards under fire to reach the medics. He took a bullet in the shoulder doing it. And you just put him on the ground with a taser." Jennings shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, I didn't know." "That's exactly the problem. You didn't know. You didn't ask. You just saw an old man and assumed the worst." More voices joined in. Veterans identifying themselves, sharing stories, creating a wall of witness and memory around Dutch Patterson. Marcus watched it unfold with quiet satisfaction. This was what brotherhood looked like, not just in combat, but in every moment when it mattered. Hayes was already on her radio calling for her supervisor. Jennings had gone pale, finally understanding the magnitude of his mistake. But Marcus's attention was on Dutch. The older man had turned back toward Catherine's grave, ignoring the chaos around him. His hand rested on the headstone fingers, tracing the carved letters of her name. "I'm sorry about all this, sweetheart," he whispered. "You always said I attracted trouble, even now, even here." Rex pressed close to his side. Shadow sat at respectful distance watching. Marcus moved to stand beside Dutch, giving him space but making his presence known. "Take all the time you need," Marcus said quietly. "We've got your back." Dutch nodded slowly. "She would have liked you, Marcus. Elena, too. Kath always said she could tell a good marriage by how people looked at each other. And I saw how you looked at your wife." Marcus's throat tightened. "You knew Elena. Saw you two at the VFW dinner last Christmas. You couldn't take your eyes off her. Even when she was just getting napkins or talking to someone else. You watched her like she was the only person in the room." Marcus blinked hard, blinked. "She was." Dutch turned to face him fully. "How long?" 6 months. Cancer." "I'm sorry, son. I'm truly sorry." "Thank you. I'm sorry, too. About Catherine." They stood there together, two widowers at two graves, while the world complicated itself around them. Dutch looked at the headstone one more time. "She told me something the night before she died. She said, 'Dutch, don't you waste whatever time you've got left feeling sorry for yourself. Find someone who needs you. That's how you honor me.'" He shook his head. "I've been so wrapped up in missing her, I forgot to listen." Marcus considered this. "Maybe that's what today is about," he said. "Not the trouble, the people who showed up, the brotherhood that still exists." Dutch looked at the gathered veterans, the protective circle they'd formed, the community that had materialized from grief. "You might be right. Catherine sounds like she was a smart woman. Smarter than me. Always was." Dutch took a deep breath and stood straighter. His military bearing returning, his eyes clear. "All right," he said. "I think I'm ready now. Ready. To go home. To figure out what comes next." He looked at Marcus. "To honor her the way she deserved." Marcus nodded. "Then let's get you out of here. I've got a feeling this situation is going to get a lot more complicated before it gets simpler." As if on cue, more vehicles arrived. A police supervisor's car, 2 news vans, the funeral director looking horrified. And at the cemetery gates, a group of Marines in dress uniforms who'd received word through the veteran network and come to show support. Dutch looked at the gathering crowd. "Catherine," he murmured, "what did you get me into?" Somewhere Marcus imagined Catherine Patterson was smiling, because her husband had found exactly what she'd wanted for him. People who needed him, and people he needed too. The police supervisor's car door slammed shut with the weight of authority. Sergeant Rita Delgado had been on the force for 20 years. She'd seen every kind of mess a young officer could create. But this 3 patrol cars, a tasered veteran, a growing crowd of angry witnesses and news vans rolling up, this was a new level of disaster. "Someone tell me what the hell happened here," she demanded, striding toward the cluster of officers. Jennings stepped forward, chin lifted with defensive pride. "Sergeant, I responded to a call about a vagrant with an aggressive dog. The individual refused multiple lawful orders to vacate the premises. When he became combative, I deployed my taser to..." "Combative." Bill Turner's voice cut through like a blade. He's 68 years old with arthritis in both knees. The only thing he was fighting was gravity. Delgado looked at Dutch, still standing near Catherine's grave with Marcus at his side. "Is that the individual in question?" "Yes, Sergeant. The one in the suit, at the fresh grave, with the funeral flowers still on the ground. Jennings's confidence flickered. The cemetery was closed, and he... Kyle. Delgado's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. Did you taser a man at his wife's funeral? He was non-compliant. The dog was... Answer the question. Jennings swallowed hard. Yes, Sergeant. Delgado closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, her expression could have frozen water. Give me your badge. What? Your badge, your weapon, your taser. Right now. Sergeant, I followed protocol. You followed nothing. Her voice exploded across the cemetery. You tasered a decorated veteran at his wife's graveside because you couldn't tell the difference between grief and resistance. You called for backup on a 68-year-old widower. You threatened to shoot a senior citizen's dog. She thrust out her hand. Badge, now. Jennings's face crumpled. The reality of his situation finally breaking through his defensive shell. Please, I was just doing my job. Your job is to protect and serve, not terrorize and traumatize. She grabbed the badge when he didn't move fast enough. You're on administrative leave pending a full investigation. Officer Trent will drive you to the station. Sergeant, one more word, and I'll add insubordination to the list of charges. Jennings went silent. Trent, looking deeply uncomfortable, led his friend toward one of the patrol cars. Neither of them looked back. Delgado turned to face Dutch and Marcus. Mr. Patterson, I'm Sergeant Rita Delgado. On behalf of this department, I owe you an apology that words can't adequately express. Dutch studied her for a long moment. You were at Catherine's service this morning. I was. Third row. She taught my daughter in Sunday school 15 years ago. Best teacher Emily ever had. Dutch's rigid posture softened slightly. She would have remembered Emily. Kath remembered all her students. She did. She sent Emily a card when she graduated high school, another one when she got into college. Delgado's voice thickened. I came to pay my respects this morning because Catherine Patterson was a good woman who made this community better. And then one of my officers... She couldn't finish the sentence. He's young, Dutch said quietly. He made a mistake. With respect, sir, that's not your burden to carry. What happened to you was wrong, and there will be consequences. Marcus stepped forward. Sergeant, I have a few questions about department protocol. Delgado looked at him, taking in the naval uniform, the military bearing the German Shepherd at his heel. You're the SEAL. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Cole. Yes, ma'am. Your grandmother is the one recording everything. She is. Delgado glanced at Mrs. Carter, who still had her phone raised and pointed directly at the conversation. Smart woman. She has her moments. What are your questions, Chief Cole? First, is there any actual trespassing charge to address? Because the funeral director just arrived, and I suspect he'll have something to say about that. As if summoned, a flustered man in a dark suit rushed over. Sergeant Delgado, I'm Henry Morrison, director of Maple Grove Cemetery. I specifically told Mr. Patterson he could stay as long as he needed. We buried his wife this morning. There was never any trespassing. There was never any complaint from my office. Delgado turned slowly toward Officer Hayes. Then who called dispatch about a vagrant? Hayes checked her notes. The call came from Walter Mills, groundskeeper. The groundskeeper, Morrison repeated flatly. Walter called the police because he wanted to go home and couldn't lock up with Mr. Patterson still here. That appears to be the case. Morrison's face reddened. Walter Mills has worked for me for 6 months. As of right now, he works for no one. I'll be terminating him before the day is out. That's your prerogative, Delgado said. But it doesn't change what happened. No, it doesn't. Morrison approached Dutch with genuine distress on his face. Mr. Patterson, I don't know how to apologize for this. You trusted us with Catherine's final rest, and we failed you. Dutch shook his head slowly. You didn't fail me, Mr. Morrison. Catherine's service was beautiful. The burial was dignified. What happened after? He looked toward the patrol car where Jennings sat, head bowed. "That's not on you. Still, I want you to know that you're welcome here anytime, day or night, for as long as you need. I'll put it in writing if that helps." "That won't be necessary. But thank you." The news vans had disgorged their crews by now. Reporters and cameramen approached the perimeter of veterans who'd formed around Dutch. A young woman with a microphone tried to push through. "Sir, can you tell us what happened?" "Sir, Bill Turner stepped in front of her. "Give the man some space. He just buried his wife. The public has a right to know. The public can wait 10 damn minutes." Marcus moved to intercept another reporter trying to flank the group. "This isn't the time." "Chief Cole, is it true you're a Navy SEAL? Can you confirm?" "What I can confirm is that a veteran was mistreated at his wife's funeral, and what he needs right now is privacy. You'll get your story, but not at his expense." The reporter opened her mouth to argue. Shadow growled softly. She decided to wait. Mrs. Carter, however, had different ideas. "I'll talk to you," she announced, marching toward the cameras with her phone still in hand. "I saw the whole thing, recorded every second. Let me tell you exactly what that young officer did to Dutch Patterson." Delgado sighed. "That woman is going to be a problem." "That woman is my grandmother," Marcus said, "and she's going to tell the truth. I'd consider that a solution, not a problem." "Fair point." Dutch touched Marcus's arm. "I need to go back to her, to Catherine, just for a moment. Can you keep everyone away?" "Of course." Marcus gave a subtle signal to Shadow, then nodded to the other veterans. Without a word, they widened their perimeter, creating a corridor of privacy between Dutch and his wife's grave. Rex followed his owner, tail low, sensing the weight of the moment. Dutch knelt again, slower this time. His body still ached from the taser. His heart still ached from everything. "Well, Kath," he murmured. "That was quite a show. You always did say I had a talent for drama." He placed his hand on the headstone, feeling the cold marble beneath his palm. "Did you see them? All those people. Turner was there. Bill Turner. Remember him? Skinny kid from Oklahoma who couldn't shoot straight to save his life. He came, Kath. He remembered." His voice caught. "And there's this young fella Marcus, Navy SEAL. Lost his wife, too. 6 months ago. He's something else, Kath. Reminds me of the men I served with. The good ones. The ones who understood what honor means." Rex pressed against Dutch's leg, whimpering softly. "I know, boy. I miss her, too." He sat in silence for a moment, letting the grief wash through him without resistance. "I'm going to be okay," he finally said. "I know you were worried. I know that's why you told me what you did. About finding someone who needs me." He looked toward Marcus, who stood with his back turned, giving Dutch privacy while protecting him from the chaos. "I think maybe I found them. Or they found me. Same thing, I suppose." Dutch pressed his lips to his fingers, then touched the headstone. "I love you, Catherine Marie Patterson. I'll love you until the day I die, and probably after that, too. But I'm going to keep living. Like you wanted. Like you asked." He stood slowly, joints protesting. "I'll be back tomorrow, and the day after, and every day until it's my turn to lie beside you." Rex looked up at him with mournful eyes. "Come on, boy. Let's go face the circus." Marcus met him halfway. "You okay?" "I will be." Dutch looked at the gathered crowd, veterans, reporters, officers, civilians. "Is this really happening?" "All of this. It's happening. And it's going to get bigger before it gets smaller. I don't want to be some kind of symbol. I'm just a man who loved his wife. That's exactly why you're a symbol, because that's all any of us want to be. And when someone tries to take that away, people get angry." Dutch considered this. Catherine would have hated all this attention. Would she have wanted you to walk away? A pause. No. She'd have said standing up matters. Even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable. Then that's what we do. But Carter had finished her impromptu press conference and was marching back toward them, looking satisfied. I told them everything. Every single detail. That young reporter couldn't believe it when I showed her the video. Grandma? What exactly did you tell them? The truth, Marcus. All of it. How Dutch served 30 years. How Catherine died of cancer. How that officer called him a vagrant and threatened to shoot Rex. She patted Dutch's arm. Don't you worry. By this time tomorrow, everyone in North Carolina will know what happened. And that young officer will never work in law enforcement again. Dutch looked mildly alarmed. Evelyn, I don't want to destroy the boy's life. He should have thought of that before he destroyed your dignity. Grandma, Marcus intervened gently. Let's let the investigation run its course. Investigation. Ha, I've seen how those go. Paid administrative leave and back on the job in 6 weeks. Not this time, Delgado said, joining them. I've already forwarded my recommendation for termination. The body camera footage will confirm everything. Combined with your video, Mrs. Carter Officer Jennings won't be wearing a badge anywhere in this state. What about the other officers? Marcus asked. Officer Trent will face disciplinary action for failing to intervene. Officer Hayes. Delgado hesitated. She tried to stop it. I'll note that in my report. She did try, Dutch confirmed. Before it went bad, she tried. That counts for something. Not enough, maybe, but something. A Marine in dress blues approached the group. Young, maybe 25, with the focused eyes of someone who'd seen deployment. Master Sergeant Patterson, I'm Corporal Danny Reyes. I served in Afghanistan with the Marines who are here. We'd be honored to escort you home, sir. Dutch looked at the gathered Marines, all standing in formation near the cemetery gates. How did you all know to come? Word travels fast in the veteran community, sir. Someone posts something on Facebook, makes a phone call. 20 minutes later, every vet within 50 miles knows what's happening. Technology, Dutch murmured. Kath always said it would change everything. I just thought she meant television. Reyes smiled. This kind of technology, sir, we use for good, looking out for each other. Marcus extended his hand to Dutch. You don't have to face this alone, any of it. The investigation, the media, whatever comes next. Dutch took the offered hand. Why are you doing this? You've got your own grief to carry. Because that's what we do. My wife Elena, she used to say that helping others is how you heal yourself. I didn't believe her at the time. Too wrapped up in my own pain. He looked toward the section of cemetery where Elena was buried. I'm starting to understand what she meant. Smart woman. The smartest. Present company accepted, of course. Dutch actually smiled. A real smile, small but genuine. Catherine would have liked you, Marcus. And Elena. Maybe they're watching together right now, comparing notes on their stubborn husbands. Lord help us if they are. The Marine escort formed up as Dutch prepared to leave. Veterans and civilians lined the path to the gates, creating an honor corridor that hadn't existed an hour ago. Dutch paused at the edge of Catherine's section, looking back at her headstone one final time. I'll be back, he said quietly. Promise. Rex pressed against his leg. Shadow stood beside Marcus. 4 figures. 2 men, 2 dogs walked toward the waiting crowd. Behind them, Catherine Patterson's headstone caught the last light of the October afternoon. Beloved wife and mother, it read. But it should have said more. It should have said, here lies the reason a good man kept going. Here lies the heart of a soldier who never truly came home until he met her. It should have said, here lies love that lasted 45 years and didn't end with death. But stone can only hold so many words. The rest would live in Dutch's heart and in the hearts of everyone who'd witnessed what happened this day. At the cemetery gates, the news crews recorded the veteran escort. Cameras captured the Marines in formation, the gathered veterans saluting the German shepherds, walking with military precision. One reporter, more perceptive than the others, focused her camera on Dutch's face. What she captured wasn't anger or trauma or victimhood. It was dignity. The dignity of a man who'd been knocked down and gotten back up. The dignity of a soldier who'd spent his life protecting others and finally been protected in return. The dignity that no taser, no badge, no misuse of authority could ever truly destroy. Because dignity like that isn't given. It's earned. Through decades of service. Through 45 years of faithful marriage. Through the simple act of loving someone so completely that death itself couldn't break the bond. Dutch Patterson walked through those gates with his head held high. And somewhere, Catherine smiled. Because her husband had found exactly what she'd wanted for him. A community that saw his worth. A brotherhood that wouldn't let him fall. And a reason to keep living in a world that felt empty without her. The gates closed behind him. But the story was just beginning. What Dutch didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Mrs. Carter's video had already been shared over 3,000 times. By morning, it would be national news. By week's end, it would reach the halls of Congress. And by month's end, the name Dutch Patterson would become synonymous with something much larger than one old man's grief. It would become a symbol of how America treats its veterans, and a rallying cry for everyone who believed it could do better. Sergeant Delgado watched the procession leave, then turned back to the cemetery. She had paperwork to do, reports to file. A career to potentially sacrifice on the altar of doing the right thing. But first, she had one more stop to make. She walked to Catherine Patterson's grave and stood in silence for a long moment. "Mrs. Patterson," she said quietly, "I don't know if you can hear me, but I want you to know that your husband is a good man, and I'm going to make sure he gets the justice he deserves." She placed her hand briefly on the headstone. "Rest easy. We've got him from here." Then Sergeant Rita Delgado walked back to her car, pulled out her phone, and made the call that would change everything. "Chief, it's Delgado. We need to talk about Kyle Jennings, and we need to talk about it now." The call to Police Chief Warren Blackwood lasted exactly 4 minutes. Delgado didn't sugarcoat anything. She described the taser deployment, the veteran's age, the funeral context, the video evidence, and the growing crowd of witnesses. She mentioned the Navy SEAL. She mentioned the Marines. She mentioned Mrs. Carter's social media blitz. Blackwood listened in silence. When she finished, he said only 5 words. "I'm coming there myself." The line went dead. Delgado stared at her phone. In 20 years on the force, she'd never seen Chief Blackwood personally respond to an incident. He ran the department from behind a desk, delegating fieldwork to his sergeants and lieutenants. Something about this situation had changed that calculus. She didn't have to wait long to find out what. Blackwood's unmarked sedan pulled into the cemetery parking lot 15 minutes later. He emerged looking like a man who'd aged 10 years in the drive over. "Where's Jennings?" "Patrol car, waiting for transport to the station." "And the veteran?" "Gone." Escorted home by approximately 30 volunteers, including active-duty Marines and a Navy SEAL. Blackwood closed his eyes. "Tell me this isn't as bad as it sounds." "It's worse. Mrs. Carter's video has been shared over 5,000 times in the last hour. 3 news stations have already run stories. And I've received calls from 2 city council members and the mayor's office." The mayor. Apparently, Mayor Richardson's father was in the same unit as Patterson, Vietnam. Blackwood's face went gray. "Patterson, Harold Patterson. You know him." "Know him. Rita Harold Patterson taught my son how to throw a baseball. He volunteers at the VA hospital every Tuesday. He led the Memorial Day parade for 15 years. Chief. Kyle Jennings tasered Dutch Patterson." The nickname hit Delgado like a revelation. She'd heard it before, of course. Everyone in town knew Dutch. The old soldier who helped with Little League. The veteran who organized care packages for deployed troops. The man who'd carried Mrs. Chen's groceries every week for a decade. "I didn't realize." "Of course you didn't. You've only been in this precinct for 2 years. Blackwood ran his hand over his face. Dutch Patterson is a local legend. His wife Catherine taught half the kids in this town. They've been fixtures here for 40 years. The funeral was this morning. I know. I was supposed to be there. City council meeting ran long. He looked toward the cemetery. Maybe if I'd been there, this wouldn't have happened. With respect, Chief, this wouldn't have happened if Jennings had used basic judgment. Where is he? Delgado led Blackwood to the patrol car where Jennings sat head bowed, stripped of badge and weapon. Blackwood opened the door. Out. Jennings stumbled out of the car looking smaller than he had an hour ago. The arrogance was gone, replaced by dawning terror. Chief Blackwood, I can explain. I don't want your explanation. I want you to understand what you've done. Blackwood stepped close enough that Jennings had to crane his neck to meet his eyes. Do you know who Harold Patterson is? He said he was a veteran. He's not a veteran. He's the veteran. Silver Star, 2 Bronze Stars, 30 years of service. He carried wounded men out of combat zones when he was younger than you. He survived things you can't imagine. Jennings's lip trembled. I didn't know. You didn't ask. You saw an old man at a grave and decided he was a problem to be solved. You called for backup on a grieving widower. You tasered a war hero at his wife's funeral. Blackwood's voice dropped to a deadly whisper. And you did it on camera. Multiple cameras, including body cameras that you knew were recording. I thought I was following protocol. There is no protocol for this. Blackwood's shout echoed across the cemetery. There is no training manual that says taser elderly veterans at funerals. There is no regulation that justifies what you did. Jennings started crying, actual tears streaming down his face. Blackwood watched without sympathy. Do you know what's going to happen now? You're going to become famous. The officer who tasered Dutch Patterson. Every news station in the state will run your picture. Social media will destroy you. Your career is over. Your reputation is over. Your life as you knew it is over. Please, Jennings choked. Please, I made a mistake. You made a choice. A series of choices. Each one worse than the last. And now you get to live with the consequences. Blackwood turned to Delgado. Get him to the station. Start the paperwork for termination. I want this handled by the book so there's no chance of appeal. Yes, Chief. And Rita, good work today. You handled a bad situation as well as anyone could. It shouldn't have been a situation at all. No, it shouldn't. Blackwood walked toward the cemetery gates where a few reporters still lingered. He straightened his shoulders, assumed the practiced expression of official authority, and prepared to face the cameras. But even as he spoke the right words, condemning the incident, promising accountability, expressing sympathy for Patterson, Delgado knew this was just the beginning. The video had already escaped into the digital wilderness. There was no containing it now. The next morning, Dutch woke to find his phone ringing off the hook. He'd turned off the ringer at midnight after the 40th call. Now the voicemail notification showed 87 messages. Rex lifted his head from the foot of the bed, tail wagging uncertainly. I know, boy. It's strange. All these people wanting to talk to us. Dutch shuffled to the kitchen to make coffee, moving automatically through a routine that now felt hollow without Catherine. She'd always been this one to start the pot to have breakfast waiting by the time he came downstairs. The silence was deafening. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Rex barked twice, then settled when Dutch raised his hand. Through the window, Dutch saw Marcus Cole standing on the porch shadow at his side. He opened the door. You're up early. Habit. Elena always said I'd sleep when I'm dead. Marcus held up a bag. Brought breakfast. Mrs. Chen sent enough food for a week. That woman. Catherine always said she was a saint. Can I come in? Dutch stepped aside. Coffee's almost ready. They sat in the kitchen while Rex and Shadow performed the careful ritual of canine greeting. Circling. Sniffing. Establishing hierarchy through subtle body language. Eventually, both dogs settled Rex under the table and Shadow by the door. "You've got messages," Marcus observed, nodding at the blinking phone. 87. Haven't listened to any of them. Might want to start. I've been fielding calls since dawn. Reporters mostly, but also veterans organizations, city council members, a producer from CNN. Dutch nearly dropped his coffee mug. CNN. The video's gone national. Over 2 million views as of an hour ago. 2 million people watched me get tasered. 2 million people watched you stand up for your right to grieve. There's a difference. Dutch shook his head slowly. Catherine would have hated this. She always preferred the background. Let others take the spotlight, she'd say. That's where the real work happens. She sounds like she was wise. Wisest person I ever knew. Dutch looked at the empty chair across the table, Catherine's chair. I still expect her to walk through that door, every morning, every time I hear a noise in the house. Marcus nodded. Elena's been gone 6 months, and I still reach for her side of the bed. Wake up surprised when she's not there. Does it get easier? Different. Not easier. Just different. They sat in companionable silence. 2 widowers sharing a grief that words couldn't fully express. Finally, Dutch spoke. What do they want, all these people calling? To interview you, to tell your story, to turn you into a symbol. I'm not a symbol. I'm just a man who loved his wife. That's why you're perfect for it. You're not trying to be anything. You just are. Dutch considered this. What would you do in my position? I'd use it, Marcus said without hesitation. Not for myself, for everyone else. Every veteran who's ever been mistreated. Every widow who's been denied the right to grieve. Every person who's been made to feel like their service doesn't matter. That's a lot of weight. It's also a lot of power, the power to change things. Before Dutch could respond, another knock came at the door. This time, it was Mrs. Carter, accompanied by 2 women Dutch recognized from Catherine's church group. Dutch Patterson, you're not going to hide in this house feeling sorry for yourself. Dutch blinked. Evelyn, I'm not. Don't you Evelyn me. Catherine gave me specific instructions before she passed. Told me to keep an eye on you. Make sure you don't become a hermit. She what? She called me from the hospital, 3 days before the end. Said, Evelyn, my Dutch is going to want to give up. Don't you let him. Dutch felt his eyes burn. She called you. She called everyone. Half the women at First Baptist got the same speech. We made a schedule. Someone's going to check on you every single day until you're back on your feet. The 2 women behind Mrs. Carter nodded firmly. I'm Margaret Holloway, said one. Catherine taught my granddaughter in Sunday school. That girl still talks about her. And I'm Ruth Chen. My husband runs the corner market. Catherine ordered flowers from us every week. Brought them to the VA hospital for the veterans who don't get visitors. Dutch had to sit down. She organized all this before she died. That woman organized everything, Mrs. Carter said. Your meal schedule for the next 3 months, the lawn care rotation, who's going to drive you to church, everything. I didn't know. You weren't supposed to. She wanted it to feel natural, like the community just happened to show up. Marcus watched the exchange with quiet appreciation. Catherine sounds like she was a general as much as a Sunday school teacher. You have no idea, Mrs. Carter said. That woman ran more covert operations than the CIA, all in the name of taking care of people who couldn't take care of themselves. She turned to Dutch. Which brings me to why I'm here. Besides bringing casserole. She set a dish on the counter. The mayor wants to meet with you, today, about what happened at the cemetery. The mayor, Michael Richardson. His father served with you in Vietnam. Tommy Richardson. I remember him. Good man. Didn't make it home. The mayor wants to make sure what happened to you never happens to anyone else. He's proposing new policies for how police interact with veterans and grieving families. And he needs me there. He needs you to tell your story. So people understand why it matters. Dutch looked at Marcus. What do you think? I think Catherine organized everything for a reason. She knew this might happen. Maybe not exactly this, but something. She made sure you'd have support. Maybe you should use it. Dutch was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood. Ruth, can you stay with Rex? He doesn't like being alone. Of course. I'll give him some of Mrs. Chen's beef. He loves that. Evelyn, tell the mayor I'll be there, but I'm not promising anything beyond showing up. That's all anyone's asking. And Marcus? Dutch straightened his shoulders, military bearing returning. Will you come with me? I have a feeling I'm going to need backup. Marcus smiled. That's what brothers do. The meeting at City Hall drew more attention than anyone anticipated. By the time Dutch arrived, accompanied by Marcus' shadow, and a growing contingent of veterans news crews had established a perimeter around the building. Cameras flashed as Dutch walked through the crowd. Reporters shouted questions. Mr. Patterson, how are you feeling? Mr. Patterson, do you accept the police department's apology? Mr. Patterson, what do you want to see happen to Officer Jennings? Dutch stopped. The crowd went silent. My name is Harold Patterson, he said, his voice steady and clear. I served this country for 30 years. I was married to the finest woman I've ever known for 45 of those years. She died last Tuesday. I buried her yesterday. He paused. What happened at the cemetery was wrong. It was a failure of judgment, a failure of training, and a failure of basic human decency. But I'm not here for revenge. I'm not here to destroy a young man's life. The reporters leaned forward. I'm here to make sure it doesn't happen again. To anyone. That's what Catherine would have wanted. Not anger, not punishment. Change. He turned and walked into City Hall. The crowd parted before him like water before a ship's bow. Mayor Richardson met him in the council chamber, a man in his 60s with his father's eyes and his mother's diplomatic smile. Dutch, it's been too long. Michael, your father would be proud of what you've built here. He'd be ashamed of what happened to you. I know I am. They shook hands, and Richardson led Dutch to a seat at the long table where council members had already gathered. Chief Blackwood was there too, looking uncomfortable. Mr. Patterson, I want to personally apologize. You already did that. Through Sergeant Delgado. I don't need it repeated. Still, it happened under my watch. That's my responsibility. Then make sure it doesn't happen again. That's all the apology I need. The meeting lasted 2 hours. Dutch told his story. The funeral, the officer, the taser, the veterans who came to his aid. Council members asked questions. Some sympathetic, some probing, all respectful. Marcus added his perspective as a military veteran and active duty SEAL. He spoke about the invisible wounds warriors carry, about how grief can look like non-compliance to someone who's never experienced loss. Sergeant Delgado presented recommendations for new policies. Mandatory training on veteran interactions. Supervisory approval for arrests of anyone over 65. De-escalation protocols for emotionally charged situations. By the end, a resolution was on the table. Catherine's Law, Mayor Richardson proposed. In honor of Catherine Patterson, protecting the dignity of veterans and grieving families throughout our community. Dutch stared at the mayor. You want to name it after her? She deserves it. Everything you've described, the organization, the care packages, the volunteers she coordinated. Catherine Patterson spent her life taking care of this community. It's time the community took care of her legacy. Dutch had to look away. She would have said it was too much. And what do you say? A long pause. I say she earned it, every day of her life. The vote was unanimous. Catherine's Law passed without a single dissent. As Dutch left City Hall, the crowd outside had grown even larger. But it wasn't reporters this time. It was veterans. Dozens of them. Maybe 100. Men and women in VFW caps and Legion uniforms. Some in wheelchairs. Some on crutches. All standing or sitting in silent tribute. Bill Turner stepped forward. Master Sergeant Patterson, on behalf of the veterans of this community and this country, we want you to know that we stand with you, today and always. He raised his hand in salute. One by one, every veteran in the crowd followed. 100 hands raised to foreheads. 100 backs straightened with pride. Dutch felt something shift in his chest. Not the grief. That would never fully leave. But something else. Something Catherine had been trying to tell him all along. You're not alone. You were never alone. And as long as you remember that you'll be okay. He returned the salute, holding it as tears streamed down his weathered face. Shadow sat at attention beside Marcus. Rex pressed against Dutch's leg. 2 men, 2 dogs, a community united. And somewhere Catherine Patterson smiled at the man who'd finally learned to accept the love he'd spent a lifetime giving to others. The salute ended. The crowd began to disperse, but Dutch stood frozen, staring at the sea of veterans who'd come to support him. "You okay?" Marcus asked quietly. "I don't know. I think I might be. For the first time since she died." "That's a start." "It's more than that." Dutch looked at the young SEAL. "Catherine used to say that the measure of a life isn't what you accomplish, it's who shows up when you need them." He gestured at the crowd. "Look at who showed up." Marcus nodded slowly. "She sounds like she knew what she was talking about." "She always did." Dutch smiled, the first real smile since Catherine's passing. "She always did." The crowd dispersed slowly, but the weight of what had just happened lingered in Dutch's chest like a second heartbeat. Marcus walked beside him, Shadow and Rex moving in synchronized steps as if they'd been trained together their entire lives. "Where to now?" Marcus asked. Dutch didn't hesitate. "The cemetery. I need to tell Catherine what happened." They drove in silence. Marcus at the wheel of his truck, Dutch staring out the window at streets he'd walked for 40 years. Everything looked the same. Nothing felt the same. Rex rested his head on Dutch's lap, sensing the storm of emotions his owner couldn't express. "Can I ask you something?" Dutch said finally. "Anything." "How do you do it? Wake up every day knowing she's not there." Marcus gripped the steering wheel tighter. "I don't have a good answer. Some days I don't do it well. Some days I barely do it at all." "But you keep going." "Yeah, I keep going." He glanced at Dutch. "Elena made me promise. Said if I gave up she'd haunt me forever. I believed her." Dutch almost smiled. Catherine said something similar. Less threatening, more organizing. "She really did plan everything, didn't she? You have no idea. Found a notebook in her nightstand last night. She'd written out instructions for the next 5 years. What to eat, when to see the doctor, which neighbors to avoid because they gossip too much." Marcus laughed, a genuine sound that surprised them both. "That's incredible. That's Catherine. She couldn't leave anything to chance, especially not me." The cemetery gates stood open when they arrived. Henry Morrison, the funeral director, was waiting near the entrance, looking uncertain. "Mr. Patterson, I wasn't sure you'd want to come back today, after everything that happened." "This is where my wife is. Where else would I be?" Morrison nodded slowly. "I want you to know that you're welcome here anytime, day or night. I've instructed my staff, what's left of them, to never question your presence. Ever." "What's left of them?" "Walter Mills, the groundskeeper who called the police. I terminated him this morning." Dutch felt a flicker of something unexpected. Guilt. Was that necessary? He's got a family. He called the police on a grieving widower because he wanted to go home early. I can't have someone with that kind of judgment working around people in their most vulnerable moments. Still, maybe there's another way, a second chance. Morrison stared at him. "After what he caused, you'd give him a second chance." Catherine would have. She believed in people even when they didn't deserve it. Said everyone makes mistakes. The question is what they do after. Marcus watched the exchange with quiet fascination. This was the man who'd been tasered 24 hours ago. The man who'd been humiliated, arrested, treated like a criminal at his wife's grave. And he was advocating for the person who'd started it all. "I'll think about it," Morrison said finally. "No promises." "That's all anyone can ask." Dutch walked past him toward Catherine's section, Rex at his side. Marcus hung back, giving the old soldier privacy. "You're not going with him?" Morrison asked. "He needs this time. With her. Alone." "What about you? Your wife is here too, isn't she?" Marcus looked toward the eastern section where Elena rested. "She is, but she'd understand. She always said the living need each other more than the dead need visits." "Smart woman. The smartest." Dutch knelt at Catherine's grave, his movements slower than yesterday. The taser had left its mark, a soreness deep in his muscles that reminded him with every motion what had happened. "Well, Kath, you're famous now. Or I am. Same thing, I suppose." Rex settled beside the headstone nose, touching the cold marble. "They're calling it Catherine's Law. Can you believe that a law with your name on it? You always said you wanted to leave the world better than you found it. I think you did." He traced the carved letters of her name with trembling fingers. "I met with the mayor today. Michael Richardson. Tommy's boy. You remember Tommy. He didn't make it back from Vietnam, but his son grew up right. He's doing good things for this town." A bird sang somewhere in the distance. "There's this young fella Marcus, Navy SEAL. Lost his wife too about 6 months ago. He's been looking out for me. I think you'd like him. Steady, honorable. The kind of man you always said I should mentor." Dutch was quiet for a moment. "I know what you're thinking. You're thinking this is exactly what you wanted. All these people showing up. All this change happening. You planned this, didn't you, somehow? From wherever you are." He smiled through tears. "You always were 3 steps ahead of everyone else." Footsteps approached behind him. Dutch didn't turn around. "Give me a minute, Marcus." "It's not Marcus." The voice was younger, shakier. Dutch's body tensed. He turned slowly. Kyle Jennings stood 10 feet away, civilian clothes replacing his uniform. His eyes were red-rimmed, his posture defeated. "What are you doing here?" I needed to apologize. In person. Not through lawyers or press releases." Rex growled low and warning. "Easy, boy." Dutch stood facing the young man who'd tasered him. "You shouldn't be here. There's probably a restraining order being processed right now." "I don't care." Jennings' voice cracked. "I haven't slept since yesterday. I keep seeing your face, hearing that sound you made when you fell. I can't." He broke down. Full, heaving sobs that shook his entire frame. Dutch watched him cry, feeling something he didn't expect. Pity. Not forgiveness. Not absolution. But pity for a young man who'd made a terrible mistake and was now drowning in the consequences. "How old are you, son?" 24. 24. I was 20 when I shipped out the first time. Thought I knew everything. Thought authority meant control. Took me 3 tours and a bullet wound to learn the difference." Jennings looked up, confusion mixing with his tears. "What difference?" "Between power and service. Between enforcing rules and protecting people." Dutch took a step forward. "You had power yesterday. You used it to hurt someone who wasn't a threat. That was wrong. It was cruel. And you'll carry it for the rest of your life." I know, I'm so sorry." "Let me finish." Dutch's voice hardened. "But you're not a monster. You're a kid who made a catastrophic mistake. The question isn't what you did, it's what you do next." Jennings stared at him. "How can you say that? After what I did to you?" "Because my wife spent 45 years teaching me that people are more than their worst moments. And because holding on to anger would hurt me more than it hurts you." Marcus had approached without either of them noticing. He stood at the edge of the row, shadow at his side, watching the encounter with guarded intensity. "Dutch, you okay?" "I'm fine." You want me to handle this? No. Dutch kept his eyes on Jennings. The boy came to apologize. That took courage. Stupid courage, maybe. But courage. It's still inappropriate. He shouldn't be within 100 yards of you. Probably not, but he's here. And Catherine would have said that means something. Jennings wiped his face with his sleeve. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just needed you to know that I'm sorry. Really, truly sorry. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make up for what I did. Dutch considered the young man for a long moment. What are you going to do now, without the badge? I don't know. My father's a veteran, Vietnam. He won't talk to me. Said I dishonored everything he fought for. He's right. You did. Jennings flinched as if struck. But you can rebuild. It'll take time. Years, maybe. But you can become someone worth respecting. Dutch's voice softened slightly. Start with the VA hospital, Tuesday afternoons. Ask for Betty at the front desk. Tell her Dutch sent you. The VA hospital. Volunteer work. Sitting with veterans who don't get visitors. Listening to their stories. Learning what service actually means. You'd let me do that. After everything? I'm not letting you do anything. I'm giving you an opportunity. What you do with it is up to you. Jennings stared at the ground. Why? Why would you help me? Because Catherine would have. And because sometimes the best way to honor the people we've lost is to give second chances to the people who are still here. Marcus stepped forward. I think you should go now. Jennings nodded quickly. Yes, right, I'm going. He started to turn, then stopped. Mr. Patterson, I'll be there. Tuesday, I promise. We'll see. The young man walked away, shoulders hunched, a broken thing trying to find its way back to wholeness. Marcus moved to stand beside Dutch. That was either incredibly generous or incredibly foolish. Maybe both. Catherine would say there's no difference when it comes to people. You think he'll actually show up? Dutch watched Jennings disappear through the cemetery gates. I don't know, but if he does, maybe something good comes out of this mess. And if he doesn't, at least, I gave him the chance. You're a better man than I am. No, I'm just older. You have more time to become this forgiving. Marcus almost smiled. Elena used to say something similar, that grudges are for people who think they'll live forever. She was right. We spend so much energy being angry at people who've wronged us. Energy we could spend actually living. Dutch turned back to Catherine's grave. Speaking of living, there's something I need to do, something Catherine asked me to do a long time ago. What's that? Visit your wife, with you. Pay my respects. Marcus went still. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. You've been looking out for me since yesterday, taking care of a stranger because it was the right thing to do. The least I can do is meet the woman who raised you right. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Elena didn't raise me. She saved me. There's a difference. Tell me about her. While we walk. They moved through the cemetery together, two widowers with two dogs heading toward a headstone that Marcus visited every week but rarely talked about. I met her at Walter Reed, Marcus began. I'd taken shrapnel in my leg during an operation in Syria. Nothing life-threatening, but enough to need serious rehab. She was a nurse. No, a patient. Same wing. She was recovering from her first round of chemo. Marcus's voice thickened. She had the worst hospital gown in existence. Looked like it was designed by someone who hated joy. But she was laughing at something on her phone when I walked past. This full, real laugh. I stopped in the middle of the hallway like an idiot. Love at first sight. I don't believe in love at first sight. But curiosity at first sight? Absolutely. I had to know what was so funny. What was it? A video of a cat falling off a table. Most basic internet content imaginable. But the way she laughed, I knew right then I wanted to hear that laugh every day for the rest of my life. They reached Elena's section. Her headstone was simpler than Catherine's, but the flowers around it were fresh. Someone was still bringing them regularly. Elena Marie Cole, beloved wife, my anchor in every storm. Dutch read the inscription twice. You chose that. She chose it, before the end. Said she wanted people to know that marriage isn't about fair weather. It's about storms. About someone choosing to stay when everything's falling apart. Dutch felt his eyes burn. Catherine said something similar. Called marriage a series of decisions. Every day deciding to love each other again. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. They would have been friends, I think. Catherine and Elena. They would have been trouble. Two women that strong in the same room, God help us all. Marcus actually laughed. A real laugh, full and unexpected, the first one Dutch had heard from him that didn't sound forced. Elena would have organized Catherine's entire volunteer schedule within an hour, then criticized it for being too efficient. Catherine would have reorganized it back, with color-coded tabs and laminated instruction cards. A battle of wills. A beautiful disaster. They stood together looking at Elena's headstone, while Rex and Shadow lay quietly nearby. Can I tell you something? Marcus said. Anything. I came here yesterday to say goodbye. Really goodbye. I was going to visit Elena's grave one last time, then request a deployment. Anywhere. The more dangerous, the better. Dutch's chest tightened. You were going to get yourself killed. Not actively. But I wasn't going to fight very hard to survive either. Marcus stared at the headstone. 6 months of waking up alone. 6 months of wondering what the point is. I'd had enough. What changed? Your grandmother called, told me what was happening, told me you needed help. Marcus shook his head slowly. I was halfway through digging my own grave when God or Elena more likely sent me someone else to save. You think it was her, Elena? I think she knew I was about to do something stupid, and she couldn't actually smack me upside the head, so she arranged the next best thing, a purpose, a reason to keep going. Dutch looked at Catherine's section visible across the rows of headstones. They're definitely working together up there, plotting, scheming, making sure we don't waste whatever time we have left. Terrifying thought. The best kind of terrifying. Marcus knelt beside Elena's grave. Hey, beautiful. I brought someone. Dutch Patterson. His wife Catherine is over in Section C. I think you'd like her. Dutch knelt too, ignoring the protest of his arthritic knees. Mrs. Cole, it's an honor to meet you. Your husband is a good man. One of the best I've encountered in 68 years. You picked well. Marcus smiled. She would have said she didn't pick me. She would have said we just happened to be in the same hospital at the same time, with the same terrible taste in cat videos. That's called fate, son. That's called Elena being humble. They stayed there for a while, speaking to their wives, sharing stories, letting the grief flow through them without resistance. When they finally stood, something had shifted between them. A bond forged in shared loss. An understanding that required no words. What now? Dutch asked. Now we go back to living. Like they wanted. Like they planned. Marcus looked at both headstones. And we don't do it alone. Deal. They shook hands. Two widowers. Two veterans. Two men who'd found each other in the darkest moment of their lives. Rex pressed against Dutch's leg. Shadow pressed against Marcus's. 4 figures walked out of the cemetery as the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon. Behind them, 2 headstones stood in silent communion. Catherine Patterson, Elena Cole. 2 women who'd never met, but who'd both loved warriors. Both taught them how to live. Both left behind instructions that somehow miraculously brought their husbands together. The gates closed behind them. But this wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. Dutch looked at Marcus as they reached the parking lot. My house has too many empty rooms. Catherine always wanted to turn one of them into a guest suite. Is that an invitation? It's an observation. Make of it what you will. Marcus was quiet for a moment. I've been sleeping on my sister's couch. She's been patient, but you need your own space. Something like that. Then come stay. For a while. As long as you need. Dutch, that's not... It's exactly necessary. For both of us. Dutch opened his truck door. Catherine said to find someone who needs me. You said Elena wanted you to stop being alone. Seems like the solution is obvious. Marcus stared at him. You're serious. I haven't told a joke in 40 years. Catherine always said I was useless at comedy. She sounds like she was honest. Brutally. Lovingly. But brutally. Marcus looked at Shadow, who seemed to be waiting for a decision. I'll think about it. You'll come. Don't overthink. Is that an order, Master Sergeant? Consider it strong advice from someone who's been where you are. Dutch climbed into the truck. Now let's go. Mrs. Carter probably has dinner waiting and that woman gets ornery when people are late. They drove toward Dutch's house as the sun set over the town of Maple Grove. Behind them, the cemetery fell into peaceful darkness. 2 headstones kept watch over the quiet. 2 women who'd given everything for the men they loved. And 2 men who were finally learning to honor that gift, not by giving up, but by keeping each other alive. 3 months passed like water through open fingers. Marcus moved into Dutch's guest room 2 days after their conversation in the cemetery. Neither of them called it permanent. Neither of them needed to. Shadow and Rex had established their own hierarchy within the first week. Shadow deferred to Rex in matters of the house, where to sleep, which door to guard, who got first access to the water bowl. Rex, in turn, followed Shadow's lead outside, recognizing the younger dog's superior training and instincts. They've got it figured out better than most humans. Dutch observed one morning watching the 2 shepherds share a patch of sunlight. Dogs don't waste time on ego, Marcus replied. They just work out what makes sense and stick with it. Wish I'd learned that 40 years ago. You learned it. Just took a war and a marriage to drill it in. Dutch laughed, a sound that had become more frequent over the weeks. The first month had been hard. Adjusting to another person in the house after 45 years with Catherine. Learning each other's rhythms, when to talk, when to give space, when to simply exist in companionable silence. But they'd found their balance. Dutch cooked breakfast. Marcus handled dinner. They split the dishes, the laundry, the endless small tasks that made up a life. And every Tuesday, they went to the VA hospital together. Kyle Jennings was already there when they arrived for their first visit. The young man had shown up exactly as he'd promised, looking terrified and uncertain. Betty at the front desk had nearly thrown him out until Dutch intervened. He's with me. Dutch, this is the boy who... I know who he is. He's here to learn. That first day, Jennings had followed Dutch through the halls like a shadow, watching him interact with veterans twice his age. Listening to stories of battles fought decades before his birth. Seeing perhaps for the first time the human cost of the wars he'd only read about in textbooks. By the second month, something had shifted. Jennings returned every Tuesday, then added Thursdays, then started coming on his own, visiting veterans. Dutch had introduced him to building relationships that had nothing to do with his former badge. He's different, Marcus observed after one session. He's learning, slowly, but learning. You really think people can change that much? Dutch considered the question. Catherine believed it, and she was right about most things. The media attention had faded, as media attention always does. Catherine's law passed through the state legislature with bipartisan support, creating mandatory training requirements for police interactions with veterans and grieving families. Dutch testified twice. Both times Marcus sat beside him. Both times Shadow and Rex waited in the hallway, calm and patient. The day the law was signed, Mayor Richardson invited Dutch to the ceremony. He'd tried to decline. I don't need credit for something Catherine started. That's exactly why you should be there, Marcus argued. Because you won't take credit. Because you'll make it about her. So Dutch went. He stood beside the governor as pens were signed and cameras flashed. He shook hands with legislators he'd never met. He accepted congratulations he didn't feel he deserved. But when they handed him the microphone, he knew exactly what to say. This law carries my wife's name, Catherine Patterson. She was a Sunday school teacher and a volunteer and the best person I've ever known. She spent 45 years taking care of others, including me. Especially me. His voice caught, but he pushed through. What happened at the cemetery shouldn't have happened, but it did. And because it did, we're standing here today making sure it never happens again. That's not justice. That's grace. The kind Catherine showed every day of her life. He looked at the crowd. Honor your veterans, not with words or ceremonies or laws. Honor them by seeing them, by remembering that every old soldier at a grave was once a young soldier fighting for everything this country claims to believe in. He placed his hand over his heart. For Catherine, and for everyone who's ever loved someone in uniform. The applause lasted 3 minutes. Dutch barely heard it. He was thinking about a graveside conversation interrupted by a young officer's misplaced authority. About the phone call that had brought Marcus into his life. About the strange alchemy of tragedy that had transformed loss into purpose. Catherine's last gift. The one she'd planned all along. 1 year to the day after Catherine's funeral, Dutch returned to Maple Grove Cemetery. Marcus walked beside him. Shadow and Rex moved in synchronized steps. Mrs. Carter followed along with Bill Turner, Sergeant Delgado, and 24 other people who'd become family over the preceding months. The grave looked different now. A permanent memorial bench had been installed beside Catherine's headstone, donated by the VFW, and inscribed with words Dutch had chosen himself. For Catherine, who taught us all how to love. Fresh flowers covered the grave. Not just from Dutch, but from people throughout the community who'd never forgotten the story of what happened here. Dutch knelt beside the headstone, his movements easier than they'd been a year ago. The grief was still there, would always be there, but it had transformed into something he could carry without breaking. Hey, sweetheart, it's been a year. Can you believe it? Rex settled beside him, older now, grayer around the muzzle but still faithful. A lot has changed since the last time we talked. Marcus moved in like you probably planned. The law passed. Kyle Jennings, you remember the officer he's volunteering at the VA 3 days a week now. Even Sergeant Delgado says he's a different person. He traced the carved letters of her name. You'd like Marcus. He's steady, honorable, still carrying his own grief, but learning to live with it. Like I'm learning. The others kept respectful distance, giving Dutch his time. I miss you every day, Kath. Every morning when I reach for your side of the bed. Every evening when I set the table for 2 instead of 1. Every time something happens, and my first thought is, wait until I tell Catherine. His voice broke. But I'm okay. I'm really okay. Because you made sure I wouldn't be alone. Because you spent your last weeks organizing my life from a hospital bed. Because you loved me enough to plan for a future you wouldn't see. He kissed his fingers and pressed them to the headstone. Thank you. For everything. For 45 years. For teaching me how to love and how to grieve and how to keep going when it all seems impossible. He stood slowly. I'll be back next week, same as always. But right now, I've got people waiting. People who need me. Just like you wanted. Marcus stepped forward as Dutch rejoined the group. You okay? Better than okay. Dutch looked at the assembled crowd, veterans, neighbors, friends, family. She did this. All of this. From wherever she is, she's still taking care of people. Sounds like quite a woman. The best I ever knew. The crowd began the slow walk toward the cemetery gates. But Dutch paused, turning back for one last look at Catherine's grave. Something caught his eye. A figure standing at a distance, half hidden behind a row of headstones. Young. Uncertain. Kyle Jennings. The former officer hadn't approached, hadn't joined the memorial gathering, but he was there paying his respects in the only way he felt he could. Dutch raised his hand in acknowledgement. After a moment, Jennings raised his in return. Then the young man turned and walked away, heading toward the VA hospital visible beyond the cemetery walls. "What was that about?" Marcus asked. "Second chances, the kind Catherine believed in." They walked through the gates together, two widowers who'd become brothers, two dogs who'd become partners, a community that had become family. Mrs. Carter caught up to them slightly out of breath. "Dutch Patterson, don't you walk so fast. Some of us are 73 with bad knees." "Evelyn, you're healthier than I am." "I am not. I have conditions." "You have opinions. That's different." Marcus hid a smile as the familiar bickering continued. This had become their rhythm. Dutch and Mrs. Carter arguing like siblings, Marcus playing referee, the dogs watching with apparent amusement. "Are we still doing dinner at your place?" Mrs. Carter asked. "Everyone's invited. Marcus is cooking." "Marcus is what?" Marcus stopped walking. "Since when?" "Since I just volunteered you. I made dinner 3 nights this week. And it was excellent. Everyone says so." "Everyone who?" "Ruth Chen, Margaret Holloway, Bill Turner after you made that pot roast." "That pot roast was Elena's recipe. I barely—" "Then Elena can take the credit. But you're still cooking." Marcus opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. Some battles weren't worth fighting. Besides cooking, Elena's recipes had become something more than just preparing food. It was a way of keeping her present, of honoring her memory through action rather than just words. Dutch understood that. He'd started using Catherine's cookbook, attempting dishes she'd perfected over decades. Most turned out wrong, too much salt. Not enough thyme, ingredients he couldn't quite remember. But the trying mattered. The trying was the point. Dinner that night filled Dutch's house with more people than it had held in years. Bill Turner and his wife, Sergeant Delgado and her daughter, Mrs. Carter with 2 casseroles she'd insisted on bringing despite Marcus's protests. Half a dozen veterans from the VFW who'd become regular visitors, and in the corner, looking uncomfortable but present, Kyle Jennings. Dutch had invited him that morning. "You've earned a seat at the table. Time you started acting like it." Jennings had tried to refuse. Dutch hadn't let him. Now the young man sat surrounded by veterans, listening to stories, asking questions, absorbing the weight of service and sacrifice that he'd so casually dismissed a year ago. "He's going to be okay," Marcus said quietly, watching Jennings navigate a conversation with Bill Turner. "Eventually. He's got a long way to go. Don't we all? Some of us further than others." Marcus looked at Dutch. "You really believe that in redemption, after everything?" "Catherine believed it, and she was usually right." Dutch paused. "Elena believed it too, didn't she?" "She did. Said there's no such thing as a person beyond saving, just people who haven't found the right reason to change." "Smart woman." "The smartest." They stood together, watching the room full of people who'd become family through circumstance and choice. Shadow and Rex lay near the fireplace, 2 German shepherds at peace, their working days behind them, but their purpose still clear. "Dutch." Marcus's voice was quieter now. "Yeah. Thank you. For that day at the cemetery. For letting me help. For everything after." "You don't need to thank me." "I do. Because I was about to give up. And you gave me a reason not to." Dutch turned to face the younger man. "You gave yourself a reason. All I did was provide an opportunity. That's not nothing." "No, it's not." Dutch smiled. "Catherine would say that's what we're here for. Providing opportunities. Showing up when people need us. Being the reason someone keeps going." She sounds like she was wise. Wisest person I ever knew. Dutch looked at the room full of laughing, talking, living people. "And she's still teaching me. Every day, through everyone she touched. Elena, too. I hear her voice sometimes, telling me to get off my ass and do something useful. Then we should listen. Wise women, both of them. The wisest. Mrs. Carter approached with plates of food. You two stop being philosophical and eat. Marcus, your pot roast is getting cold. Elena's pot roast, Marcus corrected. Elena's pot roast through your hands. Same thing. She thrust plates at both of them. Now sit. Eat. Be grateful. They sat. They ate. They were grateful. And somewhere Dutch knew Catherine was watching, satisfied, at peace. Because her husband had finally learned the lesson she'd been teaching for 45 years. Love doesn't end when someone dies. It transforms. It becomes the hand that helps a stranger stand. The voice that offers comfort to the grieving. The presence that reminds the lost that they are not alone. It becomes legacy. Dutch looked at his house full of people, veterans and civilians, young and old, broken and healing. This was Catherine's legacy. This was what she'd built with a lifetime of small kindnesses, casual mentorships, quiet organization. This was her final gift. And Dutch would spend whatever time he had left making sure it continued. The evening wound down slowly. Guests departed in waves, each one stopping to thank Dutch for the hospitality, for the community, for the sense of belonging he'd somehow created out of tragedy. Jennings was the last to leave. He stood at the door, looking uncertain. Mr. Patterson, I don't know how to say what I want to say. Then don't. Actions matter more than words anyway. I'm trying. Every day at the VA, I'm trying to be better. To understand what I should have understood a year ago. I know you are. That's why you're here. Jennings swallowed hard. I'll never be able to make up for what I did. I know that. But I want you to know that I think about it every day. And every day I try to honor your wife's memory by being the person she would have believed I could become. Dutch studied the young man's face. The arrogance was gone, the defensive pride. The need to assert authority over situations he didn't understand. In their place was something new, something fragile but real. Humility. Catherine believed everyone deserved a second chance, Dutch said. She also believed that second chances had to be earned. You're earning yours. Keep going. Yes, sir. Jennings walked into the night. Dutch closed the door and turned to find Marcus watching him. That took guts. Inviting him here. Catherine would have done it sooner. Catherine sounds like she was braver than both of us. She was, in every way that mattered. They cleaned up in comfortable silence, Rex and Shadow supervising from their spots near the fireplace. When the last dish was dried and the last counter wiped, Dutch stood at the window looking out at the night. Marcus. Yeah. Thank you for staying, for being here. For becoming family. Marcus joined him at the window. Thank you for letting me. I didn't know I needed this. Didn't know I needed you. That's how Catherine operated. She saw what people needed before they knew themselves. Then she arranged things so they'd find it. Elena was the same way. Said I was her project, her most challenging renovation. Dutch smiled. We married above our station, both of us. Way above. They stood together as the clock struck midnight. A year since Catherine's funeral. A year since a young officer made a catastrophic mistake. A year since a Navy SEAL answered a phone call that changed everything. To Catherine, Dutch said quietly. To Elena, Marcus added. To the women who loved us, who saved us, who made sure we'd find each other when we needed it most. Rex raised his head. Shadow sat up. 4 figures in a quiet house, honoring the memories of those who'd shaped them. And somewhere beyond the window, beyond the night, beyond the veil that separates the living from the dead, 2 women smiled. Their work wasn't finished. Their husbands still had lessons to learn. But for now, in this moment, everything was exactly as it should be. Dutch touched the window glass. I love you, Catherine. Always have. Always will. Marcus closed his eyes. I love you, Elena. Every day. Forever. The words hung in the air. Not prayers. Not pleas. Just truth. The purest kind of truth. The kind that survives loss and grief and time. The kind that transforms tragedy into purpose. The kind that makes strangers into brothers and houses into homes. The kind that Catherine and Elena had taught their husbands through 45 years and 6 months of patient, faithful, stubborn love. Dutch turned from the window. Early morning tomorrow. The VFW wants us at the Memorial Day planning meeting. Already. Time moves fast when you're actually living it. Marcus nodded. Elena always said that. Said life goes by while you're busy making other plans. Smart woman. The smartest. They walked toward their respective rooms, Rex following Dutch's shadow, following Marcus. At the hallway, Dutch paused. Marcus. Yeah. I'm glad you're here. I want you to know that. Not just because Catherine arranged it, because you've become family. Real family. The kind you choose. Marcus's throat tightened. I'm glad too. More than I can say. Then don't say it. Just keep showing up. That's what matters. I will. I know you will. Dutch walked to his room. Marcus walked to his. 2 doors closed softly. 2 men who'd found each other in the wreckage of grief. 2 veterans who'd learned that service doesn't end with discharge papers. 2 widowers who'd discovered that love doesn't die with the beloved. It lives on. In memory. In action. In the way we treat the strangers who become family. In the way we honor those we've lost by caring for those who remain. That's what Catherine knew. That's what Elena understood. That's what Dutch and Marcus were finally learning. And that is the truth that outlasts everything. Every loss, every grief, every lonely night when the absence feels unbearable. Love remains. Love transforms. Love builds communities out of tragedy and brotherhood out of pain. Because that's what love does. That's what it's always done. And that's what it will continue to do long after we're gone through the people we've touched and the lives we've changed. Dutch lay in bed, Rex curled at his feet. Good night, Catherine, he whispered to the darkness. Down the hall, Marcus did the same. Good night, Elena. And somewhere in a place beyond grief and time, 2 women who'd never met in life stood watch over the men they'd loved. Their work wasn't finished. But for tonight, for this moment, everything was exactly as it should be. A house full of healing. A community full of purpose. A legacy full of love. That's what veterans deserve. That's what widows understand. And that is the America worth fighting for. The America that remembers. The America that shows up. The America that refuses to let grief become the end of the story. Because it's not the end. It's the beginning. Always the beginning. And it starts with a simple truth that Catherine Patterson lived, and Elena Cole embodied, and Dutch and Marcus finally understood. We are not alone. We were never alone. And as long as we remember that, as long as we keep showing up for each other, as long as we honor our dead by caring for our living, we never will be. That's the promise. That's the legacy. That's the love that never dies.